If you're interested in non-duality, or you're on the spiritual path, you might have noticed that there's an apparent tension between the truth that you're already pure and free and the idea that something needs to be done in order to realize that freedom. On the one hand, you're told that you are pure awareness, the witness consciousness, the self, that's beyond all states and all qualities. Nothing needs to be attained. But then in the next moment, you're practicing self-inquiry or sitting in meditation with the idea that some efforts need to be made to calm the mind, for example. So aren't these two perspectives in conflict with one another? Since you, the pure awareness, are already the untouched, unchanging witness of the mind, why should your state of mind matter at all in the process of awakening to your reality? So hi, I'm Catherine, and in these videos I share the insights that I gained from living for 15 years in an ashram in the Himalayas. And today I'm actually there again, visiting for a few weeks, so that's where I'm making this video from. So coming back to the apparent contradiction I was just speaking about, it's also reflected in the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita. In chapter 2 of the Gita, Krishna tells Arjuna that he needs to go beyond the 3 gunas of Prakriti, which are the fluctuating qualities or forces of Maya, which influence the whole of manifestation. I've written a booklet about the gunas, which you can find a link to in the description box below if you'd like to find out more about them. But as well as telling Arjuna that he has to go beyond the 3 gunas, at the same time, there are whole chapters later on in the Gita which go into great detail about how each guna, when it's predominant, will impact our ways of thinking and acting in the world. So why go into so much detail when we just need to transcend the gunas? In other words, when our essential nature is actually completely free from the gunas, nothing to do with them at all in reality. So in order to resolve this apparent contradiction, first of all, we need to be really clear about the distinction between being pure awareness and recognizing yourself to be pure awareness. Because it's perfectly true that your essential nature can't be made any more free or more pure than it already is. You are that, and everybody and everything in creation is just a transitory appearance within that awareness, made of nothing but that awareness. But the thing is that when that pure awareness, who you are, mistakes itself for a person with a body and a mind who's currently watching this video and calls that body and mind me and believes itself to be a separate entity who was born and who will die, it's the illusory gunas that give rise to this misidentification. And therefore it's on the level of the gunas that spiritual practice has to take place. To show how this might work, let's take the analogy of a lake on a sunny day. The lake represents the mind that's influenced by the gunas. And the nature of the mind is such that it will always be influenced by the gunas. It's made of the gunas. So when the lake is completely calm and still, the sun, which in our analogy represents pure awareness, the self, is clearly reflected in it. So the sun can be seen and recognized for what it is. This is like the mind under the calming and stilling influence of Sattva. Whereas when the lake is all choppy and wavy, the sun becomes refracted into 1,000 little points of light, each moving and appearing as if it's separate from the others. And this is like the mind under the influence of Rajas. And when the lake is all thick with mud and weeds, the sun is hardly reflected in it at all. This is like the mind when tamas is predominant. So notice that these changing states of water don't actually affect the sun at all. The sun isn't any less present when the lake is dull or more present when the lake is calm and still. In the same way, our state of mind has no impact whatsoever on the nature of pure awareness. Pure awareness remains free and unchanged regardless of our state of mind. And in the case of the actual lake, whatever condition the water is in, it doesn't actually affect our knowledge of the sun. Why? Because we already know the nature of the sun. We know that it's just one unmoving sphere of light. So we don't get fooled by the refracted points of light in the water. We see the glistening dots, but we don't think that we're seeing 1,000 suns shimmering. And when there's no reflection of the sun in the lake, We don't think the sun has gone off somewhere or really disappeared. We know that it's still there, and we're aware that we couldn't actually even see the absence of its reflection in the muddy lake without that light of the sun. So in this example, you could say that our knowledge of the reality of the sun overrides what our eyes appear to be telling us when they look at the lake. And this is like the state of self-realization or enlightenment. Once you've realized your nature as pure awareness, it doesn't matter what the mind appears to be doing. Your knowledge of this reality is constant and overrides the information that's coming from the mind and senses, whatever state they're in. But this is where these teachings become really relevant. Because imagine for a moment that you didn't have any knowledge of the sun and had only ever experienced it by seeing it reflected in the lake. Whether and how clearly you would come to know the sun as it is would then very much depend on the state of the lake. In other words, the stiller and clearer the lake was, the more easily and accurately the knowledge of the sun would be revealed. And in just the same way, when we want to awaken to the nature of pure consciousness, our state of mind can help or hinder that process. A tamasic mind will obscure the light of awareness, as if it's not there at all, as if physical matter is all that really exists. And a rajasic mind will refract it, as if you yourself and each individual you see has their own little separate bit of awareness, their own separate existence. Whereas a sattvic mind will be the optimum environment, shall we say, for the recognition of the self to take place without effort. So this is why it's helpful to cultivate sattva on the spiritual path, and why all spiritual practices are designed to have a sattvic influence on the body and mind. And interestingly, the understanding of the nature of the gunas is one such practice. And this is the case for a couple of reasons. The first is because understanding the gunas introduces a degree of objectivity and relaxes our identification with our mental processes. So instead of becoming frustrated thinking, I'm not aware of pure awareness, I don't experience it, the mind, by knowing tamas seems to be obscuring pure awareness from my mind's knowledge, but without pure awareness, I couldn't even be knowing that it was obscured. Or instead of believing I'm just too restless to meditate, I can't keep my mind still, you can think at the moment my body and mind are overstimulated by rajas. This isn't my fault, but let me take steps to reduce rajas and to increase sattva, knowing myself just to be the witness of both. And understanding the gunas can allow us to become less reactive, not just to our own minds, but to other people in the world around us. And less reactivity means less rajas and more of a chance for sattva to take its place, because the three gunas between them are a zero-sum game. So a decrease in one guna will always mean an increase in one or both of the others. So then rather than taking someone's behavior personally and getting really annoyed thinking they shouldn't be like that, you might think they're in an environment which stimulates rajas all day, so it's not surprising they're snappy right now. But it's actually got nothing to do with me. And rather than feeling terrified that something uniquely wrong is happening in the world at the moment, we can bring in the knowledge that the gunas have been fluctuating on both a micro and a macro level since time began, and they will continue to do so for as long as manifestation is in appearance. Tamas causes ignorance and hatred, and rajas creates greed and chaos. And these two forces have a very strong influence on human societies. So understanding this helps us to maintain a position of the witness and to become clearer about what we can change, what we can't change, and what never changes. The second reason that understanding the gunas can itself help to increase sattva is because sattva is associated with knowledge and clarity and transparency. So the more clearly you understand the nature of the mind, the more the mind itself becomes transparent and the self shines through clearly. And understanding the nature of the gunas is helpful for another reason. Going back to our analogy, if you'd only ever known the sun through its reflection in water, then you wouldn't just need the reflection to be clear. You would also need to understand the nature of the water itself. Otherwise, you might come to the wrong conclusion. You might believe that the sun is something that only ever appears in water, and that therefore it moves when the water moves, that it breaks into fragments when the water is disturbed, or that it disappears when the water becomes muddy. In other words, you would unknowingly project the qualities of the lake onto your understanding of the sun. So we need to understand what the water is and why its surface appearance and reflecting ability changes in order to disentangle our knowledge of the sun from that of the water, and to understand that it's only the water that changes. The sun stands alone, constant and unchanging. And in just the same way, without understanding the nature of the gunas, it's easy to confuse the changing state of the mind with you, the awareness, as if you yourself become restless or dull or clear, when in reality it's only the mind, it's only the reflecting medium that changes. So understanding all of this is really helpful on our path. But at the same time, we do have to remember that the knowledge of the gunas and the cultivation of sattva is just a means of sadhana. It's not the end goal. Because if you turn being sattvic into another identity, or you mistake having a peaceful mind for enlightenment, or feel that you need to purify or improve yourself in order to become the self, then a fundamental misunderstanding is still in place. Because what you truly are doesn't need to be improved. It doesn't need to be purified. It's already completely free. So then spiritual practice, including the study of the gunas, isn't about perfecting the mind, but just about creating the most conducive environment for you, the all-permeating awareness, to be recognized as pure, free, and forever the unchanging reality.